need to continue to ask questions, not only of others, but of ourselves.
Good evening, my friends. We are back for another episode in Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed, PTO, Inc. We are back for a member spotlight. In a little while, hopefully soon, we're going to be joined by my friend Ebony. Some of y'all already know her. And I am lucky enough to be the one who gets to interview her. Look, it's hard to get on this lady's schedule. You busy activists, change makers, y'all schedules. So what is Member Spotlight? Okay, Member Spotlight is the brainchild that came through out of my body at the board meeting this last fall in 2015. It's now 2016. And one of the most, we think, the board thinks, and hopefully you think, one of the most valuable parts of the membership is the connection to the people who do the work. When I've been at PTO gatherings, I have had one or two conversations that were worth I could not even place a value on it. The amount of comfort and camaraderie, and also like difficult and eye-opening, brain-cracking, pushing the movement forward ideas and questions, and the difficult moments, also extremely valuable. And they go on at PTO, and they go on with the people who show up to PTO type events. Whether you're new or you've been doing this forever, you know, it just happens. And so I thought, well, what if me and my little extroverted self got to interview, and some of my colleagues out on the board will get to too. I get to do the first three.
Hello.
Every time technology works, I'm like, oh, yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Which worked? Which link worked?
The new link, the one that you just sent, that said new link. Yeah. So I'm here.
You're here.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So,
how are you?
I am glad to be sitting here with you.
Thank you.
Best part of my day.
Oh, awesome.
2016. It's starting off way up here.
Yeah, I agree.
We also have this list of questions democratically decided by the board, and we can choose in pure Boal fashion to evolve it or stick with it. So,
okay.
So shall we begin?
I'm ready. Let's begin.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, now, Ebony, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Ebony Noelle Golden. I am originally from Houston, Texas, born and raised. I've been an artist my entire life. And after high school, I graduated from Texas A&M University. I studied creative writing and African American studies there. I went from A&M to American University, where I studied creative writing and earned an MFA in poetry. And from there, I went to North Carolina, where I taught for a while and did some organizing and some community and movement building work. And then I left North Carolina and came here, initially for more graduate study. Here is New York City. And after a short stint in another graduate program where I studied performance studies, I wrapped up graduate school and started a small consulting company called Betty's Daughter Arts Collaborative. which provides cultural arts direct action services to artists and organizations and community-based activists who are looking to use arts and culture for progressive social change. And I've been doing that work along with working as a director and choreographer, writing for the stage for years now. And it's really gratifying and humbling and life-affirming work. I'm really pleased to be able to do it.
You are here because of the desire to connect both new and seasoned PTO participants, members, interested parties. We decided that in 2016, we want to highlight our members, and we want to know more about, number one, we'll start here. We want to know more about you, and we want to know what you're doing, but also for the newbies, how did you find PTO, or how did you find Boal Freire? How did you enter the work?
My entrance into Boal and theater, in terms of theater, community-based theater of the oppressed, came in a couple of ways. As an undergraduate student, I remember being introduced to some of the concepts very loosely, and then reintroduced in a number of master classes and trainings that I did, you know, between college and now. But I would say my deepest kind of introduction happened while I was a student at NYU. I had the opportunity, Boal used to come here all the time, and I had the opportunity to train with him several times, and several of the master classes that I took at NYU and while at NYU were very much about exploring pedagogy of the oppressed and theater of the oppressed, and really looking to extend and expand our notions of what performance can do, and how performance, theater, collective dialogue can be a tool and a strategy for liberation. And so that's been, you know, I would say maybe about 10 years or so, my deeper work in terms of Boal's approaches and methods really got going. And I'm very thankful for that, because I don't know if any of the work I've made or been a part of making since then hasn't been touched by. In fact, I'm sure it all has been relatively impacted by the work and the scholarship and the impact of Boal on my practice, on my theater and on my performance practice, but also just on my life practice. And I would say that in combination with my studies at NYU and looking at the performance of communities, specifically Black women's creative communities, really highlights and for me, and has really rooted in my practice in terms of theater as a tool and theater as a strategy, and who can perform and how communities can perform for their own liberation. So, yeah. I'll also say that another really profound impact, my introduction and my investigation of Boal has been in my teaching as well. So opening up to really thinking about performance as a pedagogy, and the ways in which the classroom is a site for liberation and a site for really configuring ways to think about liberation and revolution, and where rehearsal and where practice falls into that. It's also really impacted by Boal and my introduction to Boal. I believe that I am a better teacher and a better facilitator of creative experiences. I'm a better listener, and that is in part to working directly with Boal on several occasions, and then being a part of a community where where those values and those beliefs are valued and are present, and the way things happen and work is created and community is formed and functions.
So for those of us like myself who didn't get to meet him or work with him directly, I do get to meet you, and I get to meet other people who have had that profound experience. And I happen to know that you have recently been kicking it up down here in South Carolina, for instance, doing teaching. So you thought of it for a reason, and I think maybe there's a story you could tell me. Is there something made you think about that?
About what in particular?
The way it has changed or shifted your teaching.
Yeah, I think the moment in which the moments that in which I began to come into contact with Boal were also moments where I was deepening my understanding of movement building. And I at one point in time, I identified as an activist, in quotations, and I don't anymore. And that's not to take anything away from folks who do and from movements who are built by activists. But at the time I was being introduced to Boal, I was shifting my understanding, and this is kind of hindsight looking back on this, but really, I think shifting the way in which I understood the capacity of what creativity could do. And I mean, I have a million stories, honestly, to share about what was happening at that time. Like, at that time, I decided that I actually didn't want to work in a higher ed, in a university, not full time. Now, maybe teaching, a special topics course, which I'm actually preparing to do soon. I've been asked to teach a course, but it's a course that I get to, create. And so I think for me, it was a lot of things are shifting, moving from the South, having only lived in the South, and then coming to New York, and really, I think my whole world view was shifting at that moment when I was being introduced to Boal, and intellectually, I think I was being challenged, in a way that I've never been challenged before. And so I think Boal's methods and practices really affirm a rigor and a love practice that I had not seen in creative spaces before. And so, but working directly with him at the Brecht Forum a number of times, I watched not only through the activities and the games that we played, but I watched him. And there were moments where in our conversation and our dialogue, I think, his approach to asking questions is really different from any other facilitator I've worked with before. And I have a picture of us, of us, and I had asked a question or something, and he, was explaining it to me, but also explaining it to the group. And the way I leaned in, to listen to him, it was just very endearing. I felt like if I could have just studied with him and skipped a lot of the other academics, that I probably would have, but I didn't know who he was. And so, I think the way that's been able to roll out in terms of my teaching is sometimes I'm in situations where, some folks will say, oh, this is really like a tough community. Or, oh, they don't do that in this community. Oh, they're not into acting and games, or they're used to a different kind of pedagogy or teaching approach. And I have seen, I've seen the tools and the strategies work in really deep and profound ways. And I don't believe in pathologizing communities, and I don't believe in pathologizing people. But I've seen folks who've been in the midst of major struggle come to a realization about themselves because of what opened up for them through, these games and these approaches and these methods. And so so I'm a believer. And I take the practices everywhere, anywhere, into any situation, whether it's people who are, high-level administrators at foundations or preschoolers, the practices are universal in that way. And the folks that help to build what we know as, Theater of the Oppressed and Boal in particular, they had a certain type of genius. They have a certain type of genius that makes, performance and collaborative dialogue irresistible. We need more of that.
I love talking with you because there's like and Boal does this. It's like there'll be a meta view, he'll zoom way out and then he'll like go right in to something really specific. And so if you will allow me, I'd love to ask you, I want to ask you two things. Number one, you have mentioned a personal practice. And I know that's important to you and fuels your work. As someone who follows your work, I know that that's very important. That's an important component. But I also want to talk about where your work is now. So however you'd like to take me with you there.
My personal practice as it relates specifically to
your work in the community?
Yeah. My work right now is really interesting. It's emerging. It's shifting. The conversations that I am having right now are some of the most dynamic and engaging and challenging, rigorous conversations I've ever had. And I think that the stakes are high in the type of work that I do and the communities I work with. The expectations are high as well. So my work is kind of, I would say, I live between worlds in a way. I am a maker, so I choreograph and I direct and I devise work for performance. And then I work as a strategist, sometimes at the same time, but in my work as a strategist, I am required to think of ways in which organizations and as well as individuals are using their cultural practice or their artistic practice for rigorous community engagement and progressive social change. That's my practice. My practice is around engagement, is around critical creative engagement and building programs that really highlight and situate creativity as a major strategy, a major vehicle for progressive social change. It really is, to be very honest with you, I teach and talk about and build strategies with what I know. I'm an artist. That's just where I am in the world. And so creative strategy and cultural art strategy is just the world that I live in. And we're in a time right now where folks are stretched very thin as it relates to what do we do about pressing life issues. And quality of life issues, social justice issues. And it really takes people from a diverse kind of background and vantage point to make change happen. And so my work is really, it's very rigorous in that folks expect for artists as well as other people, but folks expect artists to be at the table working for change. And I get into these challenging conversations with people who are like, I want to write my poem. I deserve to write my poem, and my poem is enough. And so, the challenge is not to stop writing poetry, because the beauty of poetry and the intellect of poetry is very important. And that doesn't negate the fact that poets and writers and dancers and architects and designers and teachers and it takes the whole kind of landscape in order to get to where we want to go as a collective, as a people. And so my practice is around figuring out ways in which to weave creativity, culture, art making, and engagement, sometimes all at the same time. Folks want it all at the same time. I will say also right now, what's really present in my practice is the piece around wellness. There are a number of programs and projects that I am a part of right now that are all about the intersection, the interaction, the conversation between art and wellness, and how wellness is a creative and artistic practice, and how art is a wellness practice. This is not a new conversation, but there are a number of projects and a number of philanthropic organizations and foundations that are really invested in this type of social practice and art making. And so there's a lot of writing happening, a lot of projects popping up, and a lot of conversation around the role of healing arts as an art practice, as a performance practice. And I'm definitely in that conversation in a way that, and just kind of tracking the trajectory of my work. It hasn't always been so present. But my personal practice is one around holistic wellness, and that being a very private, practice. It's not for me to tell anyone what it means to be well, but it is my I do feel very strongly that my wellness practice is holistically a part of my creative practice. And that, I think, really is the foundation for a lot of the work that I do. The question is, what does it mean to be well? What does it mean for our communities to be well? What does it mean for our institutions to be well? What does it mean to heal the traumas the social traumas? What does it mean to build practices and institutions around that? And how do I do that in the body and in the lived experience that I have, and so oftentimes that looks like a poetry workshop where we don't write any poetry, because we're thinking about and dealing with the foundations of what it means to be well. And this is a poetic process, So in South Carolina, you mentioned South Carolina, I was teaching a master class, and it was all about poetics and in performance. And so, the first 20 minutes of that master class was all breathing techniques. And when poets breathe, the world is better. The world is made stronger by poets who are breathing into their writing practice. And so yes, I could talk a lot about what my personal practice is. I could talk a lot more about that, but and I'm kind of talking, like I'm talking like I make art, very much all around loop-de-loop. But I will say, just to kind of reel it in a bit, that it does start with wellness for me, and it starts with love. My practice is rooted in that, And I'll be honest, I can't really do much else if those two things are not there. If I don't feel like I'm in a loving space, and if I don't feel like I can be well in this space, then I need to get out. And maybe I don't get out immediately, you know, but I definitely look for ways and avenues to stop those connections, because I'm about, you know, generating the good most often. That's where I'm trying to live, even if it doesn't come across that way so cleanly. So yeah, practice, starting with wellness. And then, you know, I also believe in serious rigor. And it's something that I say all the time. Our communities deserve rigor. They deserve rigor from the people who say they want to serve them and work with them, with us. And that rigor is absolutely important. You know, do not, and it's just from my, you know, communities are audiences. Communities, we can't do what a lot of us, we can't do what we say we want to do if we don't actually have a community to do it with. So be rigorous, you know, and that's a big part of my practice as well. And what's becoming more a part of my practice and has been in a long time is around evaluation. I'm often asked, as both a strategist and as a maker, what is the impact of this work? What is the impact of, you know, this conversation, this panel, this performance art piece, this experimental blah blah blah? Like, really, what are you looking to have people do once they engage this thing? And so, as a person who's not particularly trained to be in I don't know, organizational development or evaluation, but I'm starting to get clearer, you know, about what impact means. Because again, you know, if you're going to take Tuesday evening, every Tuesday evening for 3 months of someone's time, you better have an outcome that is going to really make sense for the people who are engaging in this project or whatever. And so, yeah, I believe very deeply in that. So yeah.
And you talk about work that you felt was effective, that's come up with in all of the interviews. And who was it effective for? Work that you've done that was effective, you felt was effective.
Yep. I can talk about a few pieces, a few things. I'm going to talk about Grow Green. And this program is really near and dear to my heart because a couple of years ago, I was asked to develop a community engagement social practice project for service learning class of 16 to 25-year-olds who were in a pre-GED program, so adult basic skills program, looking to really get back into the flow, the academic flow. These are young people who have been either pushed out of school or selected to leave school because of the circumstances within their schools. This is in the South Bronx. So I had actually worked with this program as a literacy instructor for several years and then went on to do other things. And when they had this opportunity, they called me and they said, Ebony, we really don't know anyone else we would call to do this but you. So can you design a program? And so I said, yeah, I think I can do that, you know, and that's the work that I do. And designing, a part of the work that I do is to design these, you know, social experiments, so to speak, where art and culture are a part of it, but may not be the whole outcome. So what I designed was a climate justice, creative activism and climate justice program that really used the whole city of New York as the classroom. So I gathered my friends who also happen to be experts in their fields around urban gardens, movement building and organizing, whole food and healthy food eating. And I've partnered with the New York Public Library, Phipps Neighborhoods, and I'm saying I, but I really mean we. I should say we. And herbalists and all kinds of people. We went and learned about, you know, ill birthing cycles and how to pick herbs out of Prospect Park. I mean, it was really an expansive program that looked at the ways in which climate and education, you know, and the way that some of these young people have been kicked out of the education system is similar to the ways in which we feel like we are not, some of us feel like young people aren't tied into the movement for climate justice. And so that program called Grow Green Ambassadors Project took those young folks all over the city. They learned how to organize, they learned how to door knock, they presented their poetry in communities, they were a part of a Greening the City festival. They learned herbs, they learned how to cook vegan, raw cuisine. And what the moment that really stands out, and I will tell this story as often as I possibly can, is when one of our students, we did a grocery store comparison as a part of this project. So they went to Whole Foods on the Upper West Side, and then they went to a grocery store in their neighborhood. And they did a comparison of what was available in terms of food choices, and why on the Upper West Side all of the foods happened to be clean and organic, and why didn't they have those things in their neighborhood. And they came up in one afternoon with such a scathing critique of the government, of food industries, of the socioeconomic and political kind of foundation of why people, who gets what and who's valuable and who isn't valuable. They came up with a very solid critique of the medical industrial complex, and it was just it takes some people a lifetime to figure out why they can't get healthy food in their own neighborhoods. But in one afternoon, the analysis of young people who some people say they can't read or they can't learn, that's why they're in the pre-GED program. But the high level analysis that they were able to craft after just going to an affluent neighborhood and coming back home, not only left an impact on me, but it left an impact on them. And and they decided what their action steps would be after Grow Green, after they went through the ambassadors program. They decided, well, I think I should change my diet. We didn't say, now that you've been through this program, what are you going to do differently? Because we know that this was a 101, and ideally we would continue to go back and work with that group, and so, but they came up with some pretty remarkable action steps for their own lives. And I'll say, as a person who has taught for a while, built residencies for many years, and as a person who also has contemplated starting a school of some sort, this was the closest iteration of a way in which I would want a school that I was a part of to function. Using the resources of your community, getting out of the quote unquote classroom and into the world, making sure that creativity is a value and a practice every day, and having a flexible and malleable pedagogy and curriculum that is actually relevant to the people who are teaching it and learning from it. Bringing in people from the community where those young people are from, and folks that have an investment in that community. And so, yeah, so that process, and I didn't teach all of the lessons. I didn't make all of the lesson plans, me personally, but really there was a tribe of people who made Grow Green work. And when I think about the importance of, having the resources and the support to do work that is about transformation and liberation, it really is based in that kind of collective understanding of it's a we are doing this because we know that our healing is all connected and woven together, and our liberation as well. And really finding the avenues in which to lift up a community as we teach and learn together. So, yeah.
I've got a question that I added to the list. I hope it's not too sneaky,
No,
but I like to ask people, because we were all new at some point to all of this. There's like a way in.
Yeah.
If you had a brand new person who's watching this on YouTube, just played a game or just somehow interfaced with an education class, where would you have them begin? Where would you suggest? What's a good place to start? What would you suggest?
It depends on where they're trying to go. Where in terms of this question, if they're trying to get to, where are they trying to get to? Like, help me craft it a little bit more. Someone who's interested in doing what? And they've just had an education or,
Let's go with, and it's something you've said a few times, and I would love to have an off-topic conversation. I'm going to ask it right now. I'm interested in how to use Theater of the Oppressed, which everybody can get to games for actors and non-actors. I find that's a good place to start. Very accessible. There's videos. But
yep.
How do I get from my book to movement building? Like, what would you suggest? Oh, too far.
I mean, it's so, okay. If you are a person who is an extrovert or can take on extrovert qualities, then I say read the books. Of course, read the books, but there is something about the games and something about the theories that the books can't teach you. It's important to get into the community, and you have to get into the community. I mean, I'll be honest, you have to get into the community in a way that's respectful, in a way that's responsible, in a way where there's some accountability involved. You must think about how you enter and what privilege you enter with and what information you enter with, and be clear about why you're entering, and be clear if you're not clear. I am not clear why I'm here, but I feel compelled to be here. I feel compelled to listen, and I feel compelled to work, and I feel compelled to do. And depending on the community, it's about being a strong, vocal ally, or for me, it's about working. So it's something that I've said, before I was a board member on PTO's board, and subsequently, finished up my board tenure, is I'm better at doing the work. I don't serve on, actually PTO is the only board I've ever served on. For that reason, quite, like, give me the job. Give me the job, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do it. And so I do think that there's certain people who can go from book to action you know. And for example, like I just moved from Harlem to the Bronx, and in that move, it's, you know, it's interesting because I've been in Manhattan almost 9 years. So I'm in a new community where people do not know me, you know, in the same way. Although I know I have some connections in the Bronx. And so last night I went to my first community meeting, and it's, you know, every community is different. So the time of just being present and listening and having folks ask you questions and going to the next thing and going to the next thing, you know, movement building and working in community, it's really, most often it's really families, you know. And when I say families, it's people who built a bond around an issue or a topic that they want to see or want to stop. And so it's important to be present. And there's a practice that, you know, I still am learning about, but it's really relevant to my how to get started, you know, this conversation around how to get started. And that is about deep listening. And I'll say this, deep listening comes up so many times in so many conversations that I have. It's like somebody needs to, you know, has coined that phrase, and we don't even know who said it first, but it's everywhere. And, you know, and deep listening, that ability to listen with your whole body without waiting to jump in like double dutch, important. Muy importante. It is very important to be able to sit and be in that space of I'm here as a witness. I'm here as a learner. And if I'm asked to speak, I will, but I'm new to this. And I think sometimes folks want to, you know, think action is about making decisions in a certain way or being on the stage. But, you know, oftentimes it's about what you do when you're not on the stage. That's the biggest, I think, link between your capacity to read the text and understand the methods and be in the space where it's actually practiced. And so I feel very deeply that yeah, listening is really important, and patience is really important. And you know, and for introverted people, it's challenging to get out there, or folks that really are looking for their tribe and you know, and want to be a part of a community, but it's just not visible where to go, or how to go, or you know where to go, but you know that there's a lot of issues with that community. You know that there's homophobia in that community, or transphobia in that community, or ageism in that community. So you don't want to go there, even though they're doing quote unquote good work, you know? So it's really challenging sometimes to find your tribe. But I will say that I have been blessed, really blessed, to be able to find tribe wherever I've been. And there is also a responsibility in that, you know, and feeling like you know how to fit in and be diplomatic enough for folks are like, okay, she's all right, we see her, she can come on board, you know. That's a privilege as well, to be a chameleon and a diplomat in that way. I'm a Libra, so I do have the ability to like just flow in and be the diplomat and see all sides. But I will say that it's definitely, it can still be challenging, because then when you find yourself accountable to multiple communities, which I am accountable to multiple communities, you have to be careful about stretching too thin and being too visible and too accessible, and the expectations being too high, you know, because you're only one person. So that thing around self-care comes back in as really relevant. So yeah, so analysis is important. knowing the information is important, and getting those practical, on the ground, heart to heart experiences as a person entering, also very important. And no need to, there's no need to rush it. There's no need to feel like because you're not on the front lines with the picket signs and the, whatever, that you're not doing the work. Sometimes the work is real local, like with your grandmother or your son or your daughter or your children or your lover. And sometimes, if you can't, like I can organize and work and do this work and people care about what I think all over, this community and that community. But taking this stuff to my family is extremely challenging. And I think other folks, I've talked with other folks that have a similar practice that talk about the challenges of making it really relevant to the people in their own homes. So sometimes if home is your domain and that's where you have the most impact and influence, given that you've done this deep investigation, start at home or stay at home. Or take it to your school or take it to your church or your place of worship. And, keep it within a container that you can, where you can make impact, because it's not as important to be here, there, and everywhere, and you're just spinning your wheels around. So, yeah.
Everybody's new and you gotta start somewhere. So it's good to be reminded that you don't have to be running out. You don't have to move to New York. You don't have, you can get, you can affect
no,
you can affect change right here. And that, we all need to hear that. You can affect change right here and right here.
Right.
That bloom something.
Yeah. If you want to be a superstar, that's a different conversation. If you're trying to be an activist superstar, that's a different conversation. But if you're trying to make change through the techniques and the methods and the practices, there is nothing wrong with the whole world not knowing, what you're doing in your home or in your community. That's most often the way it happens. Everyone is not going to be on the television with their activism or with their community work or with their movement building work. Most often it's not that way, and from my experience, with the people I have organized with, they are not on, or they might be on TV, but it's after doing the work for 25, 30 years, and so we have to, just put things in perspective. Who are we trying to influence and what are we trying to change? And strategically, anything, whether it's your academic work or it's your organizing work or your creative work, for me, it comes down to that. What am I really talking about here? What am I really trying to do? Is this just my job? Or is it really, I feel very strongly that because I have these tools and strategies, this is the language I bring to the world, and this is how I want to, be a part of leaving a positive impact on the planet. It's a question that I have to ask every day. It's a question I have to ask every day. Am I really, moving in my truth right now? Or what am I doing? And sometimes that means I have to reorient altogether what I'm doing. Or I feel affirmed. Like today was a good day. I feel affirmed in my practice. But it does take some serious, analysis and negotiation and renegotiation, because we're never the same. And the work is not always the same either, and who's involved in the work.
That's deep. That's deep. I always feel like that when I'm near you. I'm like, I wish I could hear that again.
Yeah.
So before I say goodnight, I would like to ask, you've mentioned how PTO as an organization has intersected with your life. So what would you say is the greatest benefit that you've received from being a member at PTO?
Oh, there are more than a few. Before I was a member of the board, which was so much fun, and I'm so grateful to have had that experience. But before that, as just a member, I think it was really, it was really important for me to bring work to PTO, to the conference. For 2 years, my performance ensemble, Body Ecology Performance Ensemble, brought work to the conference, and we performed. Was it 2, maybe 3 years? I can't remember now, but each time we came, we taught a workshop and we performed an excerpt of our work in progress. And every time we were together, we had a room full of people. And this is a performance ensemble of Black women. And at that time, most of those performers, all of the performers were in their 20s. And so being able to share our work and our methods within the context, the broader context of pedagogy and theater of the oppressed, just really awesome. You know, that I think has, as a member, having the opportunity to be supported, because, you know, we're artists, and sometimes the economic barriers of getting to conferences like PTO are just huge. But I have to also say that the board works really hard to get people there, you know, and it's just an awesome family and community that's created during the conference. And it's hundreds of people sometimes, you know, but still being able to grow and be in a larger community of practitioners, even if it's just for that time, you know. But oftentimes I do see people here in New York and in other places that are like, oh, we met at PTO, or I'm like, oh yeah, I saw your talk at PTO. So it's just a dynamic way to be in creative and intellectual community, because there's some, those, you know, the scholars that come through the conference are really on it and helping to really continue to make the practice relevant and rigorous, you know. And so yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the things that we wanted to make sure in the member spotlights, that we made space for people. I consider myself someone who's on the ground working, even though I was in higher ed. So you and I have a little bit of that in common. When people see this, they're going to want to be in your we. I hope that's not the strangest thing I've said all day, but
No.
They're going to know, how do they interface with you? How do they get in touch with you? How do they, like, where are you going to be? How do they, like, you know, we're moved by it. So we want to be with your we. How do we? So what can you tell us about that?
Everything is usually on my Facebook page and on my website. I'm an avid social media person. And so Betty's Daughter Arts Collaborative has a public company page, and also my website is bettysdaughterarts.com. If you Google Betty's Daughter Arts Collaborative, it'll pop up. On the web page, you will find our contact information. Send us an email and join the listserv or the e-blast list. You can do all of that on the website. And also typically the events calendar is pretty current. So if we're in your town, because wherever we go, lots of places. But if we're in your town or in your city, or you want to bring us to your town, we would love to come. We're scheduled to be. We have a lot happening here in New York, but we're scheduled to potentially be doing some work in North Carolina, in New Orleans, and back in South Carolina, hopefully in Texas. We've been asked to come in the next, several months or so. So folks should stay in touch and be in touch.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much for finding time. This is like the best idea ever, and I cannot wait to have it up on YouTube and share you with the world.
Thank you so much.
Have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Hope to see you soon, lady.
Okay.
Bye.